Good evening, folks. Thanks for coming this evening to our Drury Square Village Overlay District workshop. Really appreciate you taking the time to come out here. Just want to recognize a few folks that have come out so far. Our Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Ken Holstrom, thank you for coming. Town Manager Julie Jacobson, thank you for coming. Really appreciate you folks being here. And this, we're very excited to have this workshop and hear your thoughts on the matter, so thank you very much. As you may know, the master plan from 2006 had this as one of its key objectives to examine and revitalize, or at least examine Drury Square for possible town center aspects, since most of us consider it to be our cultural center of town, despite its geography not being the exact center. However, just recently, this in 2016, we applied for and received a grant for $10,000 of technical assistance funds from a fund called the Massachusetts Downtown Initiative, issued by the Department of Housing and Community Development. We tried 3 times before we finally got it, but we got it. And we're very happy to have the consultant services delegated to us from a very reputable company known as the Cecil Group. And before I introduce the folks that are here, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about their company. They are comprised of architects, urban designers, planners, landscape architects, and graphic designers. Their work includes urban design, land planning, community planning, landscape architecture, sustainability planning, and institutional planning, which helps towns and cities realize their potential through planning and design. They are well-rounded, well-recommended, experienced, and award-winning company, having recently received the 2016 Plan of the Year Award from the New Hampshire Planning Association for the Dover, New Hampshire Downtown Pedestrian and Vehicular Access Streetscape Plan. Its list of accomplishments and awards is too long to name at this time, especially considering how anxious we all are to get started on Drury Square. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Steve Cecil from the Cecil Group.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Very good. Let's see if we got that from you. Good. Well, thank you very much for coming this evening, and thank you very much for that kind introduction. And with me this evening is Margarita Iglesia, who is a planner and urban designer as well. We've been working for a number of years with the Downtown Initiative of the Department of Housing and Community Development. They've had this wonderful program where they offer grants, they're focused grants, which allow us to work with communities who are trying to define a downtown or try to find how to build a center or solve different kinds of issues and problems. The process that we have underway is going to examine Drury Square and think about the kind of tools that you have available as a town and the kinds of design and economic incentives that you can create to make it a place that better reflects your own image as a community and also communicates that image to the community, to visitors and to others around you. It's a really fascinating kind of corner of New England that I begin to understand. Ever since we got this grant, because we work all over the state, and I'm flying up and down I-90 all the time, and I just get off, and I come over to this corner. I've seen that mall for years, but I never really knew about Drury Square. And one of the things that is interesting about New England is that in the old places, the square would be like this empty little plaza with all the buildings around it. In New England, a lot of times Crossroads turns into the square. And I kind of wanted to know, well, does everybody know that this is Drury Square? And apparently everybody knows Drury Square pretty well around town. Is it fair to say? Yeah, you say, I'll meet you down at Drury Square, you know where that is. It has some wonderful assets that we're going to talk about this evening, but we're also going to talk about what it doesn't have and what it should have in the future. So as we take a look at this place, what I'm going to do is, let's see if I get this right, we're going to give you an overview of what this process is all about, and then we're going to discuss with you, we have some tables set up, to sit around and talk to you about what are the existing conditions, what's out there, what's good, what's not good. And from there, what are the elements? How do we develop a vision of what this Drury Square should be about in the future? We're going to bring that together and talk about what we should do, and that's going to help us put together a set of reports and drawings and recommendations. So part of the purpose behind this, coming from your comprehensive master plan, was the idea of creating a more walkable district. It's very automobile oriented today, and it's a place that you can put together both civic and commercial facilities. The fact that you have such strong public ownership, municipal ownership, is really important. So part of this is trying to understand how bicyclists, motorists, pedestrians will work in the future, thinking about the identity of what this place is about. And as you do that, try to increase the economic value, because investment on the private sector side has to have a reward for it, has to pay off. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how you think you can do that. And then another key aspect that many towns have been very successful with is using design guidelines. The quality of the design as things happen, whether it's signage or it's a new addition or it's a new building coming in, what is the look and feel that gets created. Interestingly enough, the people who do shopping malls these days, or shopping centers like over in Millbury at Legacy Place in my town in Dedham, the private sector folks have very strong design standards and guidelines for what happens. And they do that not because they like design, but they like actually to make money. And they know that if you create an environment that looks attractive, people will come and they will shop and they will use those places. But when you're looking at a lot of different properties and different goals, a lot of times that gets lost. And we have to remind ourselves this is good for everybody, but how do we go about doing that? So we'll show you a little bit about that. So one of the things that we've been doing, and we're going to be talking a little bit about, is making sure that we understand there's a lot of data underlying information. Who owns the properties? How are they shaped? What are the uses here? What's the traffic? What's happening? This community workshop tonight is really an opportunity for us to listen and learn and gather ideas that you have or will form this evening. We're going to put together some recommendations and draft guidelines, and then a report which we'll be reporting back to the town, and we need to think about a little bit about the format for that. I think we're talking about the board, select committee, the planning board, a kind of forum where you can come back to and sort of see what our thinking has been about what can occur. So the area generally is an area that was defined during the comprehensive plan and in the grant process. But one of the things I want to emphasize about this is there's a certain logic here, but we're going to be looking at edges and we're not constrained to just the outlines. But the big picture here, of course, is that the crossing of Auburn Street and Southbridge Street, as I've been learning in some of the conversations over this evening, has been the town crossroads and the commercial center for over a century. And along the way, of course, the high school, and it is a spectacular high school. One of the things that we get to speak in high schools all over the place. This is one humdinger of a high school with the spectacular fields which have come to occupy such a significant portion of Drury Square area. But between the library, the pond, and DPW, you've got a lot of municipal ownership. But sort of what we're looking at are the commercial properties one layer back around those areas and recognizing what that's about. So in terms of land use, the land use map that is part of the computer database about all these areas is an interesting resource because it mirrors exactly what we're seeing out there. That it's not quite right because the library is showing up as commercial. And I'm sure they have book sales, but I'm not sure that's what they mean by commercial. It's really a municipal use. But it is that commercial crossing. And one of the things that we're very aware of, and I'm sure you're aware of too, is the fact that the Auburn Mall is such an important neighbor. But part of the challenge here is it's the parking garage that faces Drury Square. In terms of land ownership, the amount of municipal ownership is obviously really noticeable. And if we take a look at the parcels of land, one of the things that pops out to us as planners is that they are awkwardly shaped, is maybe a good way to put it. They're sort of fitted into a pattern. This is part of what New England is about. If you go out in the Midwest, everything's nice and square and rectangular, and you can do a lot of things here. Things evolve with little odd angles, and they're fat and thin and turn into corners. And that is one of the reasons that the buildings are organized in such an interesting way. So the zoning reflects an orientation for local business, which continues both in the north and the south of the study area as a whole, even though there's quite a bit of residential use in that area. The local business is pretty generous in terms of the range of what could occur under the current circumstances, and that's something that we may want to be thinking about. A lot of places have been building in apartments or housing of some sort, other kinds of uses. You can do that here by special permit, but it's not a strong part of what's happened or pushed forward in your zoning. However, there is this mixed-use overlay, development overlay district, and the idea of a crossroads center is fundamentally about mixed use. It's not a specialized area, and that's part of what the purpose is behind this. We noticed that there's an aquifer protection district. So as we take a look at this, the recreation and civic amenities, the park amenities, the tennis courts, and one that we're quite interested in understanding better is how the community as a whole uses the high school and the grounds. Because you've got a great pond and waterway that snake their way through it, but the traffic, the volume of traffic, and the lack of pedestrian walkways and even crosswalks that are comfortable, there's a huge volume of traffic that's moving through here. And that's a detriment to the kind of scale and land use and pedestrian environment that's among the goals that you've listed. The design character is a hodgepodge, is the best way to put it right now. There's some contemporary buildings, there's some historic looking buildings, there's some older buildings. This is the only district that we've worked in that has a missile. It's noticeable. I don't know how that's a Polaris missile, right? And I'm thinking, how did I know that? I don't know. I don't sure I ever saw a Polaris missile before, except in books. But the story of Goddard and the character of this town is something that immediately you see that and you say, there's a story here. What is that story, and how does it get told, and how does it relate to this place? So we started reading up on where the liquid fuel rockets were, who was Goddard, where did he come from, how did he decide to come over here. Of course, there was, I know there was a golf course at the time. It was probably just an open field. It was a way of probably, he was trying not to hit anybody with those missiles. But those photographs of Goddard are really fantastic. They're really famous images, iconic images that are part of this. So we've had a chance to look and learn a little bit about the area and how it works today. But what we'd like to do now is to actually sit down and talk to you. We have laid out a series of plans and maps, and we'd like to learn more about what Drury Square is from your eyes. And we're going to collect the comments, then we're going to get back together again, share what those comments are going to be, but then what we want to do is dream a little bit, vision what the future would be. What could this place be in the future? And we want to be able to have that insight, so our job will be to start to translate that into the kinds of changes that might occur, what it might look like, but also how do you get there from here, which will be our homework after the end of the session. So that's kind of what we're about. Does that all make sense to you? You're all at the right meeting so far? That's good. That's great. So I think that might be the best thing. Do you have any general questions about what this is about, or anything that I can answer first? Yes, sir.
I guess one question is, how far out from Drury Square, the corner, do we want to go out?
Yeah.
Quarter of a mile, half a mile? Give us some idea.
Yeah, the idea that had been put forward in the planning and grant application is the more brightly colored area that's defined by the black lines in that drawing. But we could extend that quite a ways, or it depends on what we want to do. So, for example, there are two sides to Swanson and Brotherton, but the mall itself is a kind of a whole chunk, so we hadn't planned on focusing on that. And of course, there's the rail alignment in the residential areas on the other side. But if we want to push out beyond this, if it's helpful, we should do that.
When do you think to start construction?
Oh, and because this is a project, it won't be a building or a place, changes will be happening, but let me give you a few ideas about that. We understand that the town is in line for roadway improvements that have been funded by Mass DOT in a few years, and that design will start. So that's probably 3 or 4 years out before anything would happen. But one of the things that can come out of meetings like this is to say, well, before we start laying some more asphalt down, maybe sidewalks and bicycle lanes would be good. Maybe there really should be some street trees along that way. Maybe the crosswalks should be something different. So this is setting the stage. The other thing that can happen is that if a landowner is contemplating improving their building or putting a new sign in, those things can be happening soon, and our job would be to try to inspire that. But the kinds of changes that really convert an area like this, take about 10 years. Take about 10 years before you really start to see all the changes, because there's so many different parcels and so many different players. So a little vision is required and a lot of patience, but it really does happen. Okay. So I think what we want to do is to divide. We've got 3 tables set up, which should work just about right. What I'm going to ask is if you could divide yourselves into 3 exactly the same size groups. So how to do this? We could count off just like in high school, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But maybe the better thing to do is just to head back. And if you'll just look around and do we have 4? I think we should do 4 groups.
Groups of 8.
That's good. Do we have a 4th person who can help us facilitate?
No, we can make
The 3?
three tables of 8 people.
Yes. 3, 8. Oh, okay, about 8 people. Oh, I see. I see. You're doing the calculation for me. Okay, I was trying to understand the hand signals there. So if we divide up into about 8 people, and if so Matthew's going to help and Margarita's going to help. Margarita, do you want to describe a little bit what we're going to actually do here and then get started?
Yes, so when you get to the table, there's going to be markers. Feel free to grab one. And there's going to be 2 sheets with images. One has a map of basically this map that you see here on the screen. And we are going to use it to talk about what's there. When you go here, where do you go? What places in this area should remain as they are from your perspective? Which places should change and why? And that will help us a lot to understand what's happening now. And then the other sheet is about writing down what we want to achieve with this study. So there's 2 columns, and also we will all be entitled to write in them. And we can set goals for this study, things that we want to achieve in the long term, and also vision elements or more specific things that we would like to happen or not happen when we look into the future. And we will probably use about 20 minutes for each one of these discussions, and at the end, you will select one person in your group to give us a summary of what was discussed or learned or agreed upon, and we will use those presentations to conclude the meeting.
Great. So let's head back.
Yeah.
Great.
We need landowners versus like, yeah. Yeah, because everything is to write with, right? On, like write on ideas on the map.
There, feel free to become involved. I mean,
was an effort to look at an overall overlay district for the whole area. And that would have included down that road to the highway overpass as well, trying to look at.
That goes all the way to Central Square you're talking about.
So it ends at the highway overpass.
Yep. Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yep. So Wild Willies, Weeping Willies.
Leaving Willies, yeah.
Shopping.
No, they were.
So first, instead of the key good things and the key not good things, then we'll talk about maybe the good ideas.
So one of the things that we talked about was trying to create Drury Square to be somewhat of a destination location where there could be maybe some shopping, some additional restaurants, things like that. and also to try to tie in the public space that's already existing, the fire station and the library. You have guarded park in between, but there's no real good way to get from one to the other. I spend a considerable amount of time in Drury Square, and I watch people stand at one side looking at the library, or from the library looking over, wondering how to get there. So we thought maybe some sort of a pedestrian bridge, you know, like a covered bridge or something that could tie the two properties together, so you could easily get from the library and the Goddard Park and back and forth. Also to kind of utilize Auburn Pond that's there, maybe some sort of paddle boats or you know, duck boats or something like that, that again, some sort of a destination. When we looked at Drury Square in terms of what we could do for revitalization as far as business, we identified one specific area at the corner where the Verizon store is and sort of some of those scattered businesses that are in there. That's really the only location that if there was to be some redevelopment that you could look at, almost creating some sort of a, you know, when you drive in, there'd be businesses like along the edges on some sort of a horseshoe with some restaurants and some shopping and parking in that area. We'll just look at the notes here. We talked about maybe some mixed use with some housing in Drury Square to get some residents in the Drury Square area. We talked about things to just kind of dress up the street as far as banners and lighting and things like that, just to make the area a little more attractive. And then from a safety perspective, making it a pedestrian safe area with walkways and crosswalks and things like that in order to try to get people there. Am I missing something? I think we pretty much covered that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so our group focused on some similar things. One of those being the streetscapes, the lighting, plantings, landscape uniformity, so you can identify that you've entered Auburn, for that matter, notably from the Worcester side, coming from Route 12. Some of the items, you mentioned a duck boat. Julie called it a swan boat. So if that's
Not a duck, it's a
preferred. Consistent signage, and this came up in the past with our proposed changes to the Drury Square Village District sign bylaw, whether uniform signage in the area would let you know you're in the center. Bike lanes, trails, ideas so that it's pedestrian friendly, walkable. We heard the same, we guys talked about the same idea about the pedestrian bridge going from the library to the fire station. The first item you see is including the mall district in the area. This way, if there were any future developments in the mall, you could almost shape it to the same uniform nature of the village district. We also talked about expanding that district, but then we digress from that because we think if you start small, you can expand later. And so we can put a lot of focus and emphasis on the area that is Drury Square, the Auburn Street corridor, and then if other parts of Route 12 south towards the Turnpike would like to get in on that idea, you could expand that nature and see how you improve the process as you go. We talked about some of the parcels and their importance to the success of the district, one of those being the areas that surround the lake, and the lake being a good promotion point for this, including putting a fountain in to make it beautiful and give it a beautification. And those properties along that side also, and how they would tie in, were probably the more valuable properties of that area, and whatever future uses or development of those could be very important to the success of Drury Square. And I don't want to cover everything because there's still another group, so I'm sure some of those things are similar. Anything I missed from our group?
That's good. Good, thanks. All right, great. Got those. So, we have two spokesmen from our group. Team. Oh, whatever, okay. Here we go, I'll be the holder, and maybe we should go to these were the kind of the opportunities and the strengths and big ideas, but maybe we should go to the big ideas. Sure.
I think our group talked about a lot of similar items of the other two groups. I think the easy answer is some type of a streetscape project. I work for Lynch, and I've been involved in and seen a lot of beautiful streetscape projects out there, from upgrading lighting to brick strips to greenery. I think one of the big assets of this whole area is all the public space down there. From Town Fair Tire, there's a big chunk of land in front of that that can be used, around the fire station, around the ponds, the library. There's a lot of public land that could be dressed up and made to really make this place look good. And I think one of the tough areas, and I think the group thought it also, was generally parking. For all these areas, these businesses were from years ago, before parking, you know, everything became a destination with a car. And a lot of these parcels, unless, you know, there's some way to make some public parking or, you know, change zoning to have shared parking in between parcels, to try to help out development down the road. One of the big items as far as I guess our group would like to see shaped in the future is maybe the Shaw's parking lot for zoning changes to not hinder what's there now for all the businesses, but as an option down the road. Because we all know, you know, all this property is very valuable property. Taxes on the property are pretty high, but by the same token, if it's advantageous for the owner to do these things, then there's a good chance they'll be done. But to handicap the owner going in, Auburn, I think, is really just starting to get back on their feet again. Up and down Southbridge Street 5 and 10 years ago, there was a lot of empty spots. And now those spots are just really starting to get filled in. And you hate to really handicap business any more than necessary, but by the streetscape, you're beautifying it, by changing the zoning to help development, I think that would help it versus, you know, I know 5 years ago there were proposals to strictly do medical or strictly do one thing or another, and I don't think that's where the town really wants to go. I think we want to create zoning opportunities, but not limit the business. That's
Good. Well, great. This is great. Well, these are just the top, we just hit the top of the ideas that emerged. And our job is going to be to talk together and put all this together. And we're going to come back with a vision of what could occur, some specific recommendations about what you can do from the zoning and design, and so that you can start setting those changes in place, communicating to people that you've got a positive vision about it and will really affect business and property owners' decisions, to know that you actually care a lot about it. And you do have a lot of control over the municipal facilities. You own a bunch of this land, so you're going to be able to make the decisions about it. And the other piece of this, and one of the really rewarding parts of working for DHCD in this program, is that there are grant programs that come along from time to time. The state likes to fund communities, maybe not now, but there will be a program 3 years from now. We're going to try to put together a report so when that grant program comes up, you can say, oh, we've got that plan already done. See, we're all ready to go. So that's part of what all this is about, is setting the stage for that future. So back to that question, when will this all get done? It will get done bit by bit over time, but you got to get started and you have to know what you're trying to achieve. So thank you very much for coming tonight. We learned a ton. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.